let's welcome John to give us a lecture, 4-step tacit knowledge retention process. And thank you so much, John. Now it's your time.
Wow, amazing. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Fisher. Thank you, Min and Icy and Dr. Pugh and Dr. Brown Grant, good friends of mine. Thank you all for being here. 我会说一点普通话, but I guess I'll speak in English. But I'll try mostly English.
Great. Thank you.
So yes, very excited. I'll share. I have one screen, one graphic to share with you, but I thought maybe at first I would just share a few words. Thinking about tacit knowledge and comparing it to explicit knowledge and the often forgotten implicit knowledge. So just assuming or trying to make sure that we're all thinking about the same things. Explicit knowledge is the written down knowledge, the information, the documents, the videos, that kind of explicit. So I'm very excited that Fisher and this whole community focuses on TKM, tacit knowledge management, that which can never be written down. It's conversational, it's embodied, it's something different from what's written down. The other one that I'd love to bring into mind for a few minutes here is implicit knowledge, which one way to define that would be shared assumptions. I have assumptions that I'm thinking about myself and the world, and each person has their own assumptions. And we often don't necessarily talk about those assumptions. So I would sort of say implicit knowledge is a subcategory of tacit knowledge. And as I come in and share my screen in 1 second, I'd love to, I was just listening to Dr. Pugh and Dr. Brown Grant. I'd like to draw some comparisons to exactly what they talked about as we all think about tacit knowledge, explicit knowledge, and implicit knowledge. So let's see if my screen sharing works. It should share. That should just take 1 second and then pop up for you. My plan is just to talk through this one graphic and hopefully offer you something that in about 20 minutes from now, you'll have a very practical process that you could take back into your organization and run it or facilitate it on your own or with a small group of people. This process is known as the 4-step knowledge retention process. And I actually want to pause and go quite slowly talking about knowledge retention and compare it to knowledge transfer. In fact, as I say that, there are around the world, I'm aware of 16 different knowledge transfer processes. If you were here an hour ago and Dr. Pugh was talking about the knowledge jam process, that's one of the 16 well-known knowledge retention processes. The one you're seeing on screen right now, the 4-step knowledge retention process, is another option, another one of those 16 knowledge retention processes. So I'm excited to offer you, another tool to add into your toolkit, and whatever fits best for you, you're welcome to go use it or experiment with it inside your organization or your community, wherever it is you might be practicing tacit knowledge management. But back to knowledge transfer and knowledge retention. Notice on screen it says knowledge retention. That is purposeful because what we find over years and years of practicing this, there seems to be implicit knowledge. There seems to be an assumption that when we talk about knowledge transfer, that not always, but often means one person is transferring their knowledge, their tacit knowledge, to one other person. It's a one-way push, a one-way transfer. Or dare I say worse, it's a one-way documentation. One person is writing down their knowledge, which really means they're documenting their explicit knowledge. So again, I love how this group is called tacit knowledge. If we compare knowledge transfer, which I'm exaggerating a little bit, that definition, to knowledge retention, there seems to be some implicit knowledge or assumption when you put those two words together that we're holding on to knowledge. There's some tacit knowledge that we would like to keep inside organizational memory. That's actually quite purposeful, that the title of the process is the 4-step knowledge retention process compared to the knowledge transfer process. Just not to say that one is better or worse or right or wrong, just to have you thinking, what is it that your organization is asking you to do? What is the goal? What is the purpose? If it is transfer, then you might want to be looking at knowledge transfer processes. If it's knowledge retention and holding on, then you might just want to look at that subtle difference of holding on to tacit knowledge. I would also mention innovation or knowledge creation would be another third really important area to always keep in mind. And you'll notice in step 4 of this process, if you're reading ahead, there is an innovation step where we're creating or co-creating or collectively creating new tacit knowledge together that no one of us individually had before this process. So that's why it's knowledge retention as opposed to knowledge transfer. And it is a process. You know, in the bigger field of knowledge management, right now we're sort of in a subfield of knowledge transfer, knowledge retention. In the bigger field of knowledge management, we like to talk about people and process and technology. Technology enables process, process enables people. So personally, I really like to work on culture change and behaviors, attitudes, beliefs, people work before working on process improvement work, before working on technology work. So that word process is a very intentional, this sort of would come after cultural work and would come before technology software type work. It's process improvement considerations for you. In the upper right-hand corner of this graphic, you'll notice it says, ensuring unique and critical knowledge is not lost during retirements. Now, that's mostly true, the retirement part. This process works very well for any time that tacit knowledge is moving. If someone is being promoted, if someone is being sent on a rotation, if you're selling or divesting part of your business, if you have mergers and acquisitions happening, any kind of job movement at all, this 4-step process has been measured and sort of proven over the last 20 years to be very effective in any type of job movement. So it says retirements on screen. We do that because it's just easier to picture. If you were to literally close your eyes, think about someone that is likely to leave your organization through a retirement or leaving for any reason, it's often retirement that makes it simple to think, okay, if that person left our organization, I would be sad, I would be disappointed, we would lose a lot of tacit knowledge if we don't do something about it. These 4 steps are directly what you can do about that. Also notice in the upper right how it says unique and critical knowledge. We are not promising all knowledge. We are promising unique and critical knowledge. What is the most important tacit knowledge that needs to be created or practiced or documented or discussed, talked about in story, just like Joelle was just talking about? So I went very slowly across that top bar because I think it paints the picture of what we're talking about here. Knowledge retention, in addition to knowledge transfer, it's a process, it's unique and critical knowledge. It could even say tacit knowledge, and it's sort of retirements or job movements. So if that gives us some context, let's take a look at the 4 steps on the process or on the screen here. I'll just read you the steps quickly, and then I'll come back and read each of the rounded rectangles underneath, some of the details underneath each step. So notice step number 1 says, establish a team. Again, each word is very important. It's a team, not a group. There are many knowledge transfer processes where it's a group People come and go, and the group of people changes each time you get together. There are pros and cons. There's good and bad, or there's reasons to do that and reasons not to do that. This particular process, what makes it a little bit different is that it's a team. So if you've done any kind of teamwork, team building, leadership development, it's a team of people that have shared objectives. They trust each other, they bond, they share emotional connections. It's a team. I'm assuming you know what a team is compared to a group. Step number one is to take some time and effort to establish a team so that you can unlock the stories that Joelle talked about, you can unlock the conversations that Kate talked about, and you can get into all of this tacit knowledge because there is more of a team feel. So that's quickly step number one, form a team. By the way, I will give you a little bit of detail before I come back to it later. The ideal team size for this particular process is between 5 and 8 people. That's what we're aiming for. So it's a relatively small group of people. The largest team I've ever facilitated was 36 people. So you can go much larger. I would encourage you to have at least 3 people, but really 5 to 8 to run this process. Those 5 to 8 people are going to meet approximately 1 hour per week for 12 to 16 weeks. Or if you do the math, 5 to 8 people for 12 to 16 hours. So you can run it as fast as 2 days if you wanted to have a 2-day workshop and do this process. I would tend to encourage you to meet for 1 hour per week or 2 hours every other week with your group, your team of 5 or 8 people. So that's step number one, form a team. I'll give some more details later. Step number 2, for now, it's called create a knowledge retention plan. For now, think of it as simple as a list of questions. Did you notice when Dr. Brown Grant gave you his list of questions? What are the typical stories that are shared? Whose voices are sharing those stories? What this process encourages you to do, take a great list like Joelle just offered you, get the team together and have the team create a list of tacit questions to discuss as a team. That's what we mean for now. There's more details I'll share later, but for now, just think of it as a list of questions that the team created. It was not a predefined list that you pulled from a template. You could have got some ideas from a template, but it's meant to be the team did their best thinking to come up with that list of questions. I can tell you on average, prior to the pandemic, it was 52 questions was the average number of questions on a knowledge retention team. It's very interesting to me, during the pandemic, over the past 2 or 3 years, the number of average questions per team has tremendously increased. It's now 72 questions per team. I'd love to do some research on that. I think it's really interesting. I think before the pandemic, we assumed each other's tacit knowledge a little bit more than we should have. And I've got this hypothesis that during the pandemic, we're underestimating. We're a little bit more negative, saying, I've got even more questions to ask you because we don't get to chat or have friendly conversations when we're all, sitting at home isolated. So step number 1, create a team. Step number 2, create a list of questions. Step number 3, very predictable, share and capture knowledge. In this step, if I keep it very simple for now, you're going through every one of those 72 questions, and really important, it's not the expert. It's not only the person that's retiring that is answering and documenting all the questions. Ideally, everyone on the team is having a discussion about those questions. Everyone is asking follow-up questions. Everyone is responding with their opinion. It's meant to be, like Kate talked about, very conversational. It's not meant to be an interview. We're not just asking an expert with 50 or 60 or 70 years of experience, please give us all of your answers. We're looking to create a conversational type of environment. So again, it feels like a team and there's trust and all of us can ask and respond to each other. So to keep it simple for now, step number 3, you're going through as a group, as a team, discussing and documenting all of those questions that you created. Now, step number 4, the final step in the process. I've been doing this for a long, long time. Step number 4 is always the most difficult to describe. I think Joelle is proud of me. The way I describe step 4 is through a story rather than reading to you the details on the screen. The title of the step is Practice and Innovate. If I tell you about the very first team I was lucky to facilitate, here's what happened. There was a person that would drill holes. So think about it being like a carpenter or drilling holes in wood. Okay, so very amazing, 70, 80 years of experience, a carpenter, person that drills holes. Okay, they got 5 or 8 other drillers together. Step number 1, complete. Step number 2, the whole team came up with 50 or 60 questions. Step 2, complete. Step 3, they started talking about and documenting each one of those questions. True story. One of the questions was this: as a team, what has always blocked us from making a new innovation, a new idea, blocked us based on time or money? We either don't have enough money to create this new innovation for drilling, or we're so busy, we don't have time to rethink new ways of drilling holes. So everybody was discussing this. It was a group conversation, and the group kind of came to a conclusion that, this was in 2002, by the way, so 20 years ago. The team said, you know, it's interesting. What we do, if you go and look at car manufacturers, they don't have humans drilling holes in cars anymore. They have robots and lasers that automatically, with machines, drill these holes. But this particular team was saying, isn't it interesting that they still allow human error in this company drilling holes? But they said, you know, we've tried to automate our job. It's very expensive to buy lasers and robots and to experiment and to test, and no one's willing to pay for it, and we're very busy. So we don't have time to look at automating our job. The reason I tell you this story is because when they got to step 4, after that discussion they had about that question from step 2, discussion in step 3, step 4, they said, why don't we write a proposal and see if someone will pay for robots and lasers to automate and remove the human error in drilling these holes? I'm telling you the story because in that particular company, that client of ours, that was the first time they ever invested in robotic process automation directly from a knowledge retention team. So that's the best way I can describe practice and innovate. What it means is whatever discussions the team has in step 3, in step 4, you go do that. You go practice whatever you talked about, or you go innovate something new based on what you talked about in step number 3. So let me look at the clock. Okay, maybe about 5 more minutes. Let me go back. That's the basic 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me go back and just give you a little bit more detail on each one of these steps in case you really want to go back and experiment and try this with a small group of people in your organization. And please write about it, blog about it, put it out in the world, and let's all share our stories about running Kate's Knowledge Jam or Joelle's storytelling approaches or this 4-step knowledge retention approach. So if you look at the rounded rectangles, the boxes underneath step 1, the first sub-step says determine critical roles and skills. Now, I won't spend a lot of time on this. What it basically means is please be strategic about where you start your knowledge retention teams. Let's say you're a large consulting firm. If you're a large consulting firm, you probably have headquarters and executive staff. You probably have project managers. You probably have information technology. You probably have finance. You probably have lawyers, marketing, operations. You'll have lots of different areas of your business. I would encourage you, that box is to say, there's a practice called strategic workforce planning. There's also a practice called succession planning. I would highly encourage you as knowledge managers, as tacit knowledge management practitioners, to go and partner with strategic workforce planning, if you have that, or succession planning, if you have that, inside human resources. That will help you identify where to begin your first knowledge retention team strategically. Now, notice the next box down where it says find experts, successors, and aspirationals. I wonder how well aspirationals was interpreted. That's not really even a real word in English. We made it up. What it's trying to say is on your team, you want to have at least 3 people. One person that has a tremendous amount of experience about the topic, the tacit knowledge that you want to discuss and document and practice and innovate. At least one of those, an expert. You want to have at least one successor, one person who is either a peer of the expert or is maybe a direct report, works for the expert, someone who has almost as much experience as the expert, but just a little bit less. That's the expert and the successor. Aspirational is a word we made up. Aspirational means someone that has even less experience, but they're very excited to continue this career path, to continue this job, to continue learning the type of tacit knowledge that this team is going to talk about, practice, and innovate. So those are the minimum of 3 people that you want to have. Remember when I talked about 5 to 8 people? The way you get 5 or 8 people, my top recommendation to you would be to have 1 expert, 2 successors, and 2 aspirationals. That seems to be the ideal team size for running this knowledge retention process. And then start the team, I can describe very easily. That just means show them this slide. Do exactly what I just did for the last 20 minutes. Take them through these 4 steps, get their commitment, start to do some team building, have them say hello, say their name, their role, what they're interested in, how they have fun on weekends, right? Do some kind of team building to get the team started. And then the rest kind of flows from there. Once you've got the team started, step 2, I've already talked about the creating a list of questions. The little bit of detail I will add, I sort of already mentioned this, but a little bit more detail for you. Notice what it says there. Successors and aspirationals create the first draft knowledge retention plan. And then step 2 here, or sub-step 2, experts review the plan. This is the funniest little thing that we noticed over years and years of practice. If you very politely uninvite the experts, the people with the most experience from the second meeting, have the rest of the team create the first draft of the list of questions, the only word I can use in English is magic. There is some kind of magic and rapport and trust that the team builds to ask really difficult questions while the experts are not in the room. What I think is going on, if I had to guess, is that when the experts are in the room, everyone respects their knowledge and just wants the experts to ask the questions. You tell us what we need to know, you're the expert. So if you very politely say, experts, we're going to invite you back later, but for now, we're just going to have the successors and the aspirationals create the first list. Then we'll have the expert review that list and add or edit or think about other questions to add to it. And that's basically where I'll stop. Repository and meeting rhythm just means where are you going to store your documents, because you're going to create lots of documents. And meeting rhythm, I already mentioned. Meeting rhythm means you need about 16 hours to run this process. Do you want to have those 16 hours in 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years? How far apart do you want to spread apart these 16 hours of effort? Any time frame is okay. I tend to recommend 1 hour per week for 3 to 4 months. And then step 3, you document and discuss everything. And then step 4, you actually go practice everything that the team just talked about. And I think that's where I might stop sharing my screen and say a big thank you to Fisher and the team, and for everyone that took a few minutes to listen. And I hope you get a chance to go try that process and see what you think.
Whoa. Thank you, John. This is wonderful. You just use one slide to give us a total picture about knowledge retention process. Whoa, this is very cool. And thank you so much. You just identify 4 critical steps to capture and retain this knowledge. Oh, excellent. And actually, I want to ask you a question. Which step or which actions do you think this is the most important, or this is the critical start to kick off this process?
Wow. Lovely question. Thank you. My mind, the way you use the word kick off the process, my mind goes to step number 1. I really believe, as I mentioned, comparing teamwork as opposed to group work. I really, the most successful, the most powerful knowledge retention teams that I've been privileged to be a part of have really formed a team. They really loved each other.
Yep.
They trusted each other. Joel talked about this. They had an emotional connection.
I see.
An emotional share between them. And if you can form a knowledge retention team that has that, you're in good place.
I see. Excellent. And I think this is the key difference between knowledge retention and the knowledge transfer, right? We need to create a team including the expert, successor, and aspirational. Oh, this is great. Thank you so much. And
thank you,
Joe. I know you are good at Chinese. So have you been in China before?
I have, and I studied Mandarin for many years, and I hope to come back soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Now the door is gradually opening now in China. So you are warmly welcome to China again.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. Yeah.
Thank you.
再见. 再见. Great. So John and Dr. Karina and Hovell, thank you so much for your speech in the morning. And I see Werner Friedrich, right? You are here. And we, based on the agenda, so we will have a 10 minutes break now. So we just take a break. And thank you so much. And we will get back at 11:10 China time, right? So thank you so much, and see you later.